Right. Welcome everyone to the August 10th, 2022 special meeting of the Housing Commission. We will begin by taking roll. Commissioner Borison?
Yes, yeah.
Commissioner Everts?
I'm here.
Commissioner Gomez? Commissioner Hamilton? Commissioner Hilton?
Here.
Vice Chair Morosco?
Here.
And Chair Gray is here. Councilmember Oscar De La Torre should be joining us any moment. While we're waiting for him, let's move on to our sole item for the meeting today, which is item 9A. Open discussion by commissioners of any and all subjects relating to the Housing Commission as a body, including but not limited to its practices and procedures, composition, responsibilities, purview, limitations, staff, budget, history, and role in local government. And no action will be taken today on this agenda item. Actually, before we start, if there are no objections, I move that we move item 10, general public comment, forward before item 9. Is there any objection? Yes, Vice Chair Morosco?
I second.
Oh, second.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any objections by the rest of the commission? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and start with general public comment. We will also have item-specific public comment, but right now this is general public comment. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak? Any comments from the public?
Yes, I think you should. This is Denise Spartan. I think you should be commended for taking this action, considering housing commissions in the past have only seemed to be interested mainly, or commissioners only in their own interests and not in the responsibilities as a whole to help the community and the affordable housing tenants. So you deserve to be commended for this action. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. Are there any other general public comments before we move to item 9? General public comments.
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi. I just also want, this is Ann Thanawala calling. I did want to say that I'm just happy to see this coming around because for all of the years that I've been attending these meetings on and off, there doesn't seem to be a grasp on who's directing whom and the purpose. So I'm utterly confused the other night. The move by the City Council regarding increases, and not a single bit of discussion, not one word from anyone on the council about the Housing Commission and what role they would play to help residents who might be, financially burdened to the point of eviction. Based on this, the only thing that came up was that the Rent Control Board had the authority to help people for year one of a 3% increase. And, if inflation's here next year or 8 months from now, the same thing's going to kick in with no plan and no mention of the Housing Authority. And my understanding is that the Housing Authority controls the housing trust funds. So thank you. Thank you for doing this. I'd love to, understand this better. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Thanawala. Are there any other general public comments? General public comments. All right, then we will move ahead to item 9A, which I read, an open discussion by commissioners of any and all subjects relating to the Housing Commission as a body, including but not limited to its practices and procedures, composition, responsibilities, purview, limitations, staff, budget, history, and role in local government. Are there any public comments on item 9A? Any public comments or questions for 9A?
I'd like to say something.
Please go ahead.
This is Michael Lewis. I am also thrilled that you guys are having this open meeting discussing how you operate and any outstanding questions. I think this furthers participatory democracy in ways that the commissions and the city council have not been able to do before. And I would be thrilled, and I'm sure a lot of people would be, if this could set a precedent, not only for the Housing Commission to do every year. If you could write it down, some proclamation, probably couldn't put it in the bylaws, but make a very strong statement in support of doing this every year, not only for the Housing Commission, but all the commissions that they do this once a year, or when a substantial number of the commissioners turn over. That's about it. Thank you for doing this. It's bold, it's important, and democracy depends on this sort of open transparency. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Are there any other comments from the public?
Yes, I have a comment. Can you hear me? My name is Steve.
Yes, I can. Please go ahead, Steve.
Anyway, I was a resident of Santa Monica for 45 years, and then I retired, and I've actually moved away. But I went to Housing Commission meetings from the day I retired in 2016 until I moved in 2020. I was at every Housing Commission meeting every month, never missed one. And it took me 3 to 4 years to begin to understand the concept of what's involved in being on the Housing Commission. I was never a commissioner. I just attended every meeting because I was interested. And I know like Barton knows who I am, and Richard Hilton knows who I am. And I'm just saying, I don't know how a new commissioner can learn what they need to know in a short period of time, because there's just a lot to know about the Housing Trust Fund, about the concepts of Santa Monica laws versus state laws. And so I applaud what you're doing, but I think it takes a minimum of a year to even begin to understand what your job is. And I just want to comment on that. I also want to say that I was really affected by, I really appreciate Andy Agel, who's the head of the Housing Commission. I thought he knew what he was talking about. And I don't mean to be derogatory, but I always felt that Jim Kemper did not know a lot of what he was talking about. And he had a lot to learn as well. And I'm sure he knows a lot more than he knew when I was coming. But I'm just saying, commission, the new commissioners need to pay attention and learn, and I applaud what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Just a small correction: Andy Agel is the head of the Human Services Commission.
Well, he's a smart guy.
I'm sorry, not the Human Services Commission, the Human Services Division with the city.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other public comments on item 9A?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, Alex?
Hi, I'm Alex Elliott. I'm the chair of the Disabilities Commission. Just wanted to thank you guys for having this meeting. It's really bold. But I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what I heard earlier and talking about the importance of being able to engage in local government. And I just noticed I don't want to start off on kind of a bad foot, but we're using a platform, Blue Jeans, that isn't very accessible. So, I'd love to have folks from the deaf hard of hearing community, but this doesn't have the best live transcription feature. So I'm just hoping moving forward, this meeting, all commissions, the city council can really take into account web accessibility, best practices, not just compliance, but best practices. And I say this also because at the federal level, the DOJ just put out that they're planning to do some rulemaking around website accessibility. So it's in the best interest of everybody to get ahead of this and not be reactive to it. There's best practices. There's great organizations within Silicon Beach that can advise us on how to provide the best spaces so everyone can be at great meetings like this and provide their insights around critical issues like housing. But again, thank you for having this meeting and the opportunity for people to share their ideas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. I completely agree with you. I look forward to our platforms becoming more accessible and far exceeding basic requirements to adopt best practices. So thank you. All right. Now I would like to introduce our special guest, City Council Member Oscar De La Torre. Oscar, would you like to say hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Awesome. Well, it's really a pleasure to be here. And I first of all, I want to thank all the commissioners for your service. Such an important commission, especially right now, as we are focused on addressing the biggest crisis that the County of Los Angeles is facing, which is obviously homelessness, right? But really it's about poverty, right? It's about, failures in our economic system to lift up all people. And we need to be on the forefront, of coming up with ideas and strategies to keep people housed, so to prevent homelessness, which one important concept that we have now is the Preserving Our Diversity program, which I think we funded about $2 million in the last budget cycle, and we want to fund more. We want to expand beyond just seniors. But that's just like one idea, but, I just want to say that the Housing Commission for me is important in terms of you all being the eyes and ears on the ground for the city council, to give us sort of a frontline perspective on, these on how we can, expand housing opportunities for people, especially our most vulnerable residents in our city. So that's a real important service, and I just want to thank you all very much for providing that, and I'm looking forward to working with you all that we can strengthen opportunities, for people to remain housed, and also to ensure that we're supporting some of our most vulnerable residents in attaining housing and sustaining that housing, to keep that housing. And beyond that, just other ideas that have come up. We've been discussing about how we might be able to even strengthen policies to take people from being renters to being homeowners, right? So from renter to owner. They had a TORCA program back in the days, and we want to find a way to sort of reinvigorate that. Come back with some ideas around those concepts of how we can, even provide opportunities for renters. Aside from that, I can talk a whole lot. I want to just give you all a quick little just update. So much going on the city council. I don't even know where to start. Sometimes I'm like, wow, there's so much going on. But we have these measures that are going to be on the ballot. Just yesterday, we were working on ensuring, to get all the signatures, for the arguments for, there's two competing transfer tax measures, right? There's one that the mayor, Sue Hemmerich, and her team put together, and then there's another one that, my council colleague Phil Brock and others put together, and the city council wanted to give the voters the alternative, right, to vote for both and let the voters decide what they want to see, what they want to see in terms of the two funding strategies, right? But as many of you know, it will be a tax on sales of of $8 million or more, right? Mostly commercial. I hear also that most of the sales that occur are by corporations, so it's not really individuals that own these properties. It's a lot of them are corporations. And we have the cannabis tax also. There's a, you know, we after 7 years, of discussing sort of an ordinance to allow cannabis dispensaries in our city. And we're losing taxes to Los Angeles, so that's going to be on the ballot as well. It's going to be a cannabis tax that'll be on the ballot. Voters will be able to vote whether to approve that. If they approve that, we will be able to begin a process for RFPs and licenses, and so that we can have sensible and responsible businesses in our city. There's also a TOT tax. I think it's 1%. For hotel stays, people that stay in the city, they'll pay like a 1% more. That will, and all of this, all of these measures, what they will do is increase revenue. If they pass, they will increase revenue for us to support many of the services in the city. Some of the measures will also provide, more funding to create affordable housing and to strengthen those housing programs that we think are important to fund here in the city. Anyway, there's a lot going on. The Human Services grant program we're gonna release the RFPs. There'll be an opportunity for different nonprofits, to apply to deliver various services and youth, senior services. Of course, a lot of the money being earmarked for homelessness services. And I really want to have the Housing Commission, monitor those areas, right? Those specific funding grants, all those grants. I would love to hear, from the Housing Commission, sort of what do we see as most impactful. I want to have a robust evaluation of those programs. I think that we haven't done a very good job in the past of evaluating those programs. And I think the Housing Commission should be engaged in reviewing some of the grants that specifically target housing programs and affordable housing and homelessness services. I think you all have sort of a frontline perspective that I would like to hear from. So I'll stop there. I don't know if there's any questions. I know you all have a busy agenda. And I just want to say that, the Housing Commission is very important. And I want to support you all in any way that I can, because by you all succeeding, it'll help us strengthen programs and policies for our most vulnerable residents so that they can remain in Santa Monica and so that we can keep Santa Monica diverse. So I'll stop there and take any questions.
Thank you very much, Councilmember De La Torre. Before we proceed with questions and open discussion, I wanted to share, if those of you who have been tuning in know that since I first started on the Housing Commission, I've been asking for what I'm calling governing documents because they seem to be a bit hard to come by. And after a lot of research by Santa Monica residents and some assistance from the city attorney's office, from Doug Sloan. Most of those are attached to tonight's agenda. There are a few additional things, but for the most part, the main founding documents, including the document from 1975 establishing the Housing Commission, are attached to the agenda. So I direct your attention to those. One thing that's not attached, but I was very pleased to find, and with great thanks to Commissioner Hilton, is the Housing Commission's mission statement. The previous mission statement is not the most current iteration, and thanks to Commissioner Hilton, we now have a copy of the recently approved. In January, it was passed unanimously 6-0. To approve amendments to this mission statement, and I'm going to work with the staff liaison to ensure that that's posted on the Housing Commission website as soon as possible. I'm sorry I couldn't attach it today, but I do want to read to you from the mission statement because today is intended to be a clarifying exercise, particularly for the Housing Commission as a body. So the current mission statement says the Housing Commission was established in 1976 pursuant to Ordinance Number 1022, Ordinance Number 1168, Section 34291 of the California Health and Safety Code, and SMCC Section 1000 to serve as the advisory body to the City Council and Housing Authority. State law requires the establishment of a Housing Commission when the local legislative body, here the City Council, serves as the Housing Authority, as is the case in Santa Monica. The mission of the City of Santa Monica Housing Commission is to improve the quality of life by supporting and helping to guide the production and preservation of affordable housing. We advise and assist the City Council and City staff on housing policies, programs, and projects while working to enhance the social, economic, cultural vitality, and diversity of our community. The Commission encourages the full participation of the community in shaping its future with fairness, social justice, democracy, and valuing the public process, especially resident and stakeholder input in addressing our current and future housing. Now, having said that, because we have Councilmember De La Torre here, I wanted to start with maybe some bigger picture questions and discussion. And I first wanted to ask you, Councilmember De La Torre, if you, could speak about the overall role of the Housing Commission in city government, and in particular its relationship to the City Council and Santa Monica Housing Authority Board, which you're a member of both.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I think in the mission statement that you read is pretty clear, but, one thing that's happened since we've been elected, I mean, it's kind of crazy because we were elected and then I hadn't been in City Hall for like a whole year almost, like after being elected. Everything has been really weird. And I think we're barely ramping up right now to like getting to a phase of like bringing government back, to where it should be. And, so the communication hasn't been very fluid. I mean, I think we've had some challenges, right, in staffing patterns and getting you all up and running. There's been just a lot of hiccups. I'm really glad to see now that things are starting to stabilize. I mean, even the fact that you all have this meeting tonight is one good sign that you all are taking leadership. But I think overall, I look at the Housing Commission as sort of like, the first step, the first group of people that we should filter through ideas around housing production, around, developing concepts to keep people housed. Our whole strategy around homelessness, I think you all should be discussing. These are matters that are very important. And, being that as a city council member, like we don't have any staff. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand, like we get paid $14,000 a year. It should be like a part-time job, but even a part-time job wouldn't pay you $14,000. And then we have no staff. So we depend on commissions and commissioners and individuals in our city to provide different perspectives, because a lot of times we get one perspective, from staff, and I think they're also very limited, right, in terms of how much they can, research and come back with. So I think overall, to answer your question, I look at the Housing Commission as a group of experts, of people that can give some guidance, in terms of the policies and programs that the City Council is going to be dealing with as we set policy around housing and the creation of affordable housing, and also the management, of the Housing Trust Fund, and ensuring that we also, leverage, our revenues, and bring in federal funding and state funding so that we can create the type of voucher programs, that keep people in the city, living in the city. Like one example, for example, is that like our Section 8 voucher program is it hasn't kept pace. Where in other places like like the county of Los Angeles, I heard that they have asked for a revision and they have a new alignment, and we still aren't there. So there are little things that I would like to be made aware of, and I just want to let you all know that anytime that you have an idea, a concept, a solution to a problem, I want to keep an open ear, so that you all can have access to your city council, and I want to be a support for everybody, for every commissioner on this commission.
Thank you very much. We have Council Member De La Torre until 7:30. So I'd like to start by opening it up to questions from everyone. But it would be great if you could focus first on any questions that you would like to address to Mr. De La Torre. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Borison and then Vice Chair Morosco.
Yes, thank you, Oscar, coming tonight. So the Housing Commission has a chat and they come up with a recommendation to say, whatever it is. And then I see maybe a couple of things will come out of that. One is the council, it will be passed the council, maybe they'll consider it, but they're not required to. The other thing is that the House Commission, I'm getting a very quick learning exercise here, will tell the Housing Authority or recommend the Housing Authority does certain things, but there's no guarantee that the Housing Authority will do those because of lack of money, lack of resources. It just falls into a black hole. So how much power, if that's the right word, or influence does the Housing Commission really have?
That's I like questions about power. I think we should always be talking about power dynamics. How do we get things done, right? And who has the power to get things done? Every commission is advisory to the city council, right? So you all get to deliberate on matters, come up with a consensus, and then bring that consensus to the city council. In terms of how, from my perspective, as a council member, I think, one thing that you all should know is that the politics, if you're doing the politics on the dais, meaning if you're expecting the city council to, make a decision that is more aligned with your values and what you want to see happen, what I'm saying is you can't wait for the city council meeting. You need to start lobbying. You need to start talking to people in advance. Council members are very accessible from what I see. Some are harder to reach because they work 9 to 5. They have jobs where they can't leave until after hours. But I know that council members are working really hard to make themselves accessible. So in terms of power, the power of persuasion, I think you all have a lot of power in that regard around housing matters, but you can't just do your politics at the city council meeting. And I think that's one mistake that a lot of people think, hey, I'm going to go speak at the city council meeting. And I think by that point, to try to convince somebody that night when we're dealing with so many other different issues, it's complex and it's hard. But if you can take the time and talk to us before the city council meeting, obviously you can't talk to all four, you can't talk to 4 of us, right? There's Brown Act limitations. So we have to be careful with all that. But I think after you make a big decision, if somebody is assigned the task of talking to city council members, I think that'll be a better practice. Like how you might be able to have more power is to talk to city council members before the meeting. So then at the meeting, they already, they know what to expect. They're informed, right? That's one thing that we need is more information. And so that's one of the things that I can say. There's times as a city council member, right? I feel like I don't have the power sometimes, right? Because you need to count to 4. 4 city council members is what's going to make the difference. just the last city council meeting, I proposed that instead to have a 0% rent hike, right? So for half of the renters in the city, like 13,000 renters would get 0%, and I didn't get a second on my motion. There were other things within that motion as well that would have provided more rent relief than what currently we're going to do now. But I didn't get a second for that. So that happens sometimes in politics. And my mistake in that is not talking to city council members before. Obviously I can't talk to 4 of them, but I should be at least, I should be talking to my at least 2 other colleagues, right? So 3 of us can discuss these matters. Sometimes things though happen so fast on the fly, like this issue in particular was like kind of very last minute. But still, I just want to reiterate that if you want to be more effective, you need to speak to the council members before the city council meeting, so that they are more informed. They know what's going on. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, so that I just want to be useful to you and give you some good advice.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Vice Chair Marasco.
Hi, Councilmember De La Torre. Thank you so much for coming to our meeting tonight and helping us to understand a little bit better what our mission is, and a little bit more detail around what ways of influencing or being able to get City Council to take our recommendations into consideration. And so one of the issues that I felt that I ran into right away when I became a commissioner was being able to get items onto the agenda, and specifically with being able to communicate appropriately with staff about those agenda items. And there have been issues along the way where you submit items to the agenda and then they change the wording in the item, and there seems to be kind of, again, when you're talking about a power struggle, and I don't even know exactly what staff it is that are, doing these specific things, because it's always like an erroneous, it's just stated staff made these decisions. So what can you tell us about the relationship between commissioners and staff? And my understanding is even council members have sometimes run into that issue, and what's the best way to get around that problem?
Well, I can say that I've had that happen to me as well, Teresa, where I submit an item and then as city council members, we submit items to the city manager, and then sometimes the city manager meets with the city attorney. So I've had that situation happen where I submit an item and then language is changed and I don't end up with the same item that I submitted, so that's happened to me as well. I think in some cases it might make sense because they're legal issues that maybe we're not aware of, right? So if they clean up an item to make it legal or to avoid any liabilities, I think that's acceptable. But to water down sort of a policy perspective, I think it's inappropriate. So we need to be vigilant on that. I would say that, that we should probably, and here's the thing, I don't think it's very clear in terms of what guidance the city manager or the city attorney has, in that circumstance, right? Like, what do you do? And maybe that's really what they need to do, is like, we need to have maybe policy that says when items arrive on the city attorney's desk or the city manager's desk, that they shouldn't do anything that's going to weaken or diminish, a policy perspective. But they should only be focused on uh, illegality, right? Something that might run into an illegal matter, like, right, this is unconstitutional, for example, it's very clear, or that it brings liability to the city. Like maybe there's like three things that they should only be allowed to do. Because I can tell you right now, I don't think there's a policy. I guess there isn't, because I've never heard anybody say anything. And I've had other council members complain to me as well, saying, hey, I submitted this agenda item and it came back watered down, or it came back with something that's not what I wanted it to do. So that's something we should definitely take on. We should maybe sit down and have a discussion, so that we have clear parameters, clear guidelines for anyone who's going to change an item, who's going to make edits. So that's, I'm glad you bring that up, because it reminded me that this has happened a lot, more than, I can say more than 4 or 5 times since I've been on the city council. And to the consternation, of the author of the item. And, we need to make sure that we have clear direction for staff on what they can do when these items reach their desk. And right now we don't have that. So they're probably taking the liberty to do more than they should, not having sort of clear set direction and guidelines.
Thank you. That describes exactly what I've been experiencing. So thank you for saying that.
I'd like to ask a question related to that. Oscar, are you, I think we've talked about it some with you in and out of meetings, but can you tell us if there's anything on the city council members' radar about our lack of staff liaison now that we have someone hired to do what seems to be the actual role of the Housing Commission secretary? We don't actually seem to have what was historically the staff liaison who provided institutional knowledge. Is that on your radar?
Well, we've talked about, staffing patterns, and, there was issues with hiring a qualified person to help. And I know that's different than what you're asking for, right? Like a secretary to help with minutes and post agendas, all that is very different than what you're asking for, which is someone that has institutional knowledge and history to be a resource for you in these meetings. That's something that I will be discussing with the city manager. I want to understand sort of where are we now and where do we need to be so that we can be successful. There's a lot of housing commissioners that are brand new, right? Just like many city council members are also brand new. A lot of new blood, right, in our organization. And so we need to have those individuals that have that history, that institutional knowledge to be supportive, in our roles, because I think it's great that we have new people, but then there's also that deficit of knowledge that staff needs to fill in those gaps. So I know the Housing Commission is one commission where that's happening, but it's also happening on the city council as well. And we're about to enter another election where 2 incumbents have decided not to run for re-election. So it's very likely that we're going to end up with potentially 3 new people, or at least 2 new people. And Lana Negrete, assuming she wins her election, she's only been on the city council for what, I don't know, 6 months, close to that. So, or a year actually. No, she's been on the city council for a year. So it's just, I think the whole organization needs to have an assessment of staff's role in helping new people, especially newly appointed or newly elected individuals, succeed. Because I don't think there's a real sort of keen focus on that right now, but it's a real need in the organization. So that's something that we're definitely going to bring up. I'm hoping that we fund more. There's more funding for retreats. We need that time. I think you all as commissioners need some time to really engage and getting to know each other better, getting to know your policy passions, getting to understand sort of how things work, getting to understand the budget better. I think there should almost be like a town hall at least twice a year, to talk about budget, just that alone, So to answer your question directly, we don't have a laser-like focus on that issue or that need, but that's something that definitely is something that the organization is going to have to focus on. And the Housing Commission, I think, is front and center of that because you all have, there's been a lot of turnover and the task at hand is such a great need, right, in terms of housing and with the city's priorities. And so I'll be bringing that up with the city manager as well, so that we can make sure that we're fully staffed, but more than that, that those staff members within the organization that are the best experts that we have in the city should be filling in those gaps, should be right now playing a very supportive role. And I don't think we're there right now. I think people are, for whatever reason, it just seems like there's like a reluctance, and it might just be people are barely getting out of the COVID sort of protocols of working from home. And people aren't accustomed to sort of being back, full swing of things. But as we come back, to the full swing of things, we need to come back stronger. We need to, and coming back stronger means that shore up those weaknesses. Like, where is it? Like this commission, for example, has a lot of turnover. All right, this commission needs more institutional support. So I want to put all the commissions, right, like on the table and do that same assessment. I can guarantee you that the Housing Commission is probably one of the commissions that has the greatest need right now. So if we're going to do this equitably, right, if this is about equity, then we need to put the resources where the need is greatest. And so that's something that I'm going to bring up with the city manager.
Thank you. If I could make a suggestion, it occurred, I mean, it's unfortunately the staff liaison as a knowledge position is not something that you can hire for, because by its nature, it should be someone who's already very familiar with the city and its history and processes. But I also wonder if there may even be some retired city staff or retired city politicians who happen to have rather encyclopedic knowledge, who would be willing to, volunteer as something of a liaison for not just the Housing Commission, but for any commission that needs it, where that would be applicable, especially since right now we're in a shortage. I was just thinking I'm sure there's a wealth of knowledge in people who have previously served on boards and commissions and worked for the city and been on the city council. And so maybe that's something that could increase our resources.
That's a great idea. That's something for sure that I'm going to bring up as a solution, because you're right. There are a lot of people that have been working with the city or retired, even folks that can be a tremendous resource for us, because Santa Monica has a lot of particular issues. I think that would be a great idea.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. Are there any other questions about this?
This is Richard Hilton, and I have two comments, questions, and they're quite different for the council member. And I'll start with the reference to the board commission template requirements for all boards, commissions, same rules, agenda, meeting format. And I believe, Oscar, the council adopted the standards November 23rd at your meeting last year. I've served on quite a few non-government, non-profit boards, 501c3. Other commissioners said they have too. There's quite a difference, of course, serving on a private board of directors. It's a sales promotional role and is different from a public board commission. So the committee had recommended on what's called onboarding, board commission member training, and even anti-bias training was referenced, and this was in their recommendations handout. So my question is about meeting process, meeting facilitation. Has the city council discussed the onboard training, which of course is separate to the State Brown Act, conflict of interest public noticing requirement. Have they discussed onboard training, and is there any plan to implement it if it's needed? For example, to benefit a new commissioners, new chair, new vice chair. And then I have a second comment about the city council meetings.
Richard, so the direct answer is no. I haven't heard any discussion about onboard training. I know I brought that up. You know, I had the opportunity to talk to various. Hold on one second, please. Hold on. Yeah, sorry about that. I had some noise background. So no, there hasn't been a discussion about onboard, training, like getting that. But when I did talk to various housing commissioners related to a retreat and what are some of your needs, in a meeting with the city attorney and the city manager, I did bring that up. I said, this is a new commission. There's new leadership. There's a huge need for some training and for support. So I'll follow up again with that because I think that's really key. I mean, we should have a standard practice. When you get appointed, there should be a handbook with the mission statement, the vision statement. I ran a nonprofit for 20 years, and every board member that got appointed and selected to serve, there was a whole day of just like going through the budget, going through the bylaws, and there was a booklet, a manual. Every board member got a manual that had, all that information in there. So that's something that the city, I'm surprised. Actually, I'm really surprised that the city government doesn't have that. Also like training. I mean, yeah, there is, Brown Act training, ethics training. There's like a lot of different, within government, right? There's a lot of needs and a lot of training needs. So that information that should be standard also. There needs to be standard protocols. I'm going to look into that, because that should be policy. That should be something that happens all the time, because if not, we end up losing a lot of time. People asking questions and getting into things that they shouldn't be getting into because they just don't understand things, right? So I'll take that information very seriously, that feedback, because that's something I did bring up. But like what happens what happens with city council members' offices, so that you all know, we bring up sometimes a need or a good idea or something, but it's up to us to like stay on it, because staff also is real busy and they have a whole bunch of other things pulling them in different directions. So in order to keep the focus on an issue like this one being, let's say, like onboard training, for commissioners and handbooks and all that, I need to follow up with that. So I'm going to make a note of that and follow up with the city manager as well. But I think that would do us a whole lot of good, is that we just had a process and a protocol, for when people are appointed and when people are elected, that there's a way to process people through so that they get up to speed,
And Oscar, I think that I think it would help for the city to keep in mind that most boards and commissions have more in common than not. And so some of that training could be done for all of them at once. Now that we're all on the same fiscal year calendar, right after appointments happen, they could do it, say, once a year. And not just the Brown Act and ethics training, but things like parliamentary procedure and, being oriented to the city government and city staff and resources. That could be done for all of the commissions all together, so they wouldn't have to duplicate their efforts.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. I mean, it would be nice to even do like an annual event, where like a little conference, like where everybody comes, gets together, maybe they attend different workshops, and then there's a celebration, like I also want to create a culture where we're thanking you all. I mean, this is all volunteer work. We appreciate you all, and I want to show that appreciation. So I think, we need to do a better job, of doing that. The other thing too is we can be filming nowadays with technology. You can film a presentation and have it online so that people can have access to it. Like it should be like an inventory of videos, like understanding the housing trust fund, for example. I would like to watch that video. There's probably a whole lot of those that we can create, and that would be a very smart thing for us to do, just to have a clearinghouse of information so that if you needed something, or even if you missed, like, there's like right now it's great when you have a meeting online, because if you missed a meeting, you can go online and check it out, right? And that would be great for like important trainings. I think that's a very smart thing to do. So those are all great ideas. Thank you. Thank you.
That's a great idea. Thank you. Commissioner Hilton, you had one more question, and then Vice Chair Marasco.
Yes, Oscar, this is about accessing the city council meetings and lack of alternate format, for example, to listen to the meetings. In the agendas, of course, the printed agenda, it refers to wheelchair accessibility, also sign language interpretation. There's no reference to audio. And in one of our housing documents, one of our largest disability communities is the blind or vision impaired. It's a larger, in fact, community than the deaf, hard of hearing. About 6 months ago, I contacted the city clerk, city attorney, and city manager, and I mentioned when they deleted the alternate phone number, and this is to listen to council meetings, such as for me to listen about housing discussion, they said that it cost too much. So my comment was that the city and the city council is marginalizing, for the most part, not just persons with disabilities, but also communities that are low income, that don't have, for example, internet or computer access to the public meetings. And the city attorney, I believe, agreed, and they restored the phone number. Then about 3 months ago, they took permanently the phone number off the agendas as an alternate audio format. So do you have any comment about that? Because my reference was that probably 10% of Santa Monica doesn't have the monthly income for the computer or the other accessibility.
I'm not fully aware of those issues, but I can tell you, Richard, that I have brought up the issue of accessibility, in particular for your participation, and I know that there's some simple things that can be done, like increasing font size, for example. There were some things that were easier to do, and then some things that were harder to do. But the city staff is fully aware of those needs, and also I know the city attorney is also informed of that as well, and I'm concerned about that. So, we talk about being an inclusive, community, and I know that we funded I think $100,000 in the last fiscal cycle for language justice, which led to like more translation, of documents. So I know that there is a interest, right, and there's some funding there. So I just need to follow up on that. But we should, especially for commissioners, right? I mean, you need to be able to participate, fully. So we need to have all the technologies available so that you can participate. But aside from that,
well, Oscar, one of your city attorneys, I had a very pleasant individual conversation about a resident advisory board, and she said to me, well, why don't you participate in the city council discussions? And I told her the same thing. I said, there's no phone number anymore to even listen or participate in the city council meeting.
Well, let's follow up on that. I'm surprised that that hasn't been addressed. I would have hoped that you would already be, in a place where you're giving a thumbs up, saying thank you for making that accommodation. So I'll definitely follow up on that as well.
Well, Oscar, as a final comment, it's not just for a vision impaired blind, it's also for someone who can't afford internet. And we have probably 10%. In fact, in the Pico and other such neighborhoods, there's probably a larger number of people that would like to listen to council meetings, and they can't do it because of affordability. So maybe you could also keep that in mind.
Yes, no, for sure. Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's another.
Thank you, Commissioner Hilton. Thank you for bringing that up. I just want to say I met with the city attorney for an hour on Friday, and one of the things we discussed at length were ADA problems, access issues in the city, and in particular about city council meetings. Oscar, for what it's worth, I understand money is an issue, but if you're talking to someone about this, it may be that we can use the existing comment line because we can hear audio while you're waiting to make your comment. It may be that they can allow that for people just to listen in and not necessarily for comment, so it wouldn't require an additional phone line. So that might, be able to not need to put more resources into it, just to expand its use. But I know you have to go, Oscar. Is there anything you'd like to share with us before you do?
No, I just want to tell you all that I'm very happy to see you all meeting, taking leadership. I think that's what democracy is all about. Engaged citizenry. People working together, right, collaboratively, and just happy to be a part of this process of seeing you all just getting back in and working hard. And there's a lot of issues, obviously, a lot of ground to cover. But it's such an important time right now, especially, where people are in need. I mean, people need a strong housing commission. People need in our community, in our society, commissioners that have firsthand experience, right? Knowledge about how we keep people housed, how we sustain housing, how we grow housing especially for our most vulnerable residents. And so anything that I can do to partner with you to make your job easier, to make you more effective, count on me, and I'll do whatever I can to help.
Thank you very much, Councilmember De La Torre. Have a great evening.
All right, God bless you all. Take care.
Vice Chair Marasco?
It was directed towards council member.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I would like to say, just as an aside, because I know we also have the Disabilities Commission chair in the audience, Richard, that again, I think access to city council meetings and access issues in the city at large are really important. So I'd love to see what we can do with the Disabilities Commission and the new city attorney to try and remedy some of those things sooner than later. But thank you for raising that. Okay, let's see. Yes, Commissioner Borison.
My experience of visiting City Hall, seeing the council meetings, watching the council meetings online, and the online commission meetings has been that it's very, very helpful having the online commission meetings, especially for those who may have disabilities or have young children. It really allows a segment of the population who wouldn't be able to take part in these meetings to be able to take part. Extremely helpful. It is it can be a challenge to get to City Hall. So first of all, and also when you watch city council meetings online, not everyone's mic'd. So you can hear the commission, the councillors clearly enough, but there's lots of other conversations that you are very muffled, you don't hear, they're not properly mic'd. There isn't a single central mic over the whole council chamber that's catching all the conversations that are going on, which there really needs to be. So for me, and I think this goes back to my experience during COVID with my children, who are having remote tuition is a lot of it depends on who's running the meeting, how things are being handled. And I think you're doing an incredible job as a chairperson, and I think that really helps. So I think that in this sort of environment, the meetings that we're having right now online, I don't think you could do much better by actually being in a room together. This is pretty darn good. So I would not be unhappy to keep this format, allowing people with disabilities and with children to be able to keep going forward. But I don't know what's going to happen to that in the future. That's my opinion.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Borison. I happen to agree with you. I would like to see the option for hybrid meetings continue for all boards and commissions and the City Council to maximize the opportunity for people to participate, not just from the public in making comments, but so we can have the most possible people participating as commissioners and board members and City Council people who may not have the same, access as people who currently serve. So the same freedoms, access freedoms. So yeah, I agree with you. Now, by all means, anybody raise your hands at any time. But I do have, if there aren't any particular questions right now, I thought that we could go over the responsibilities, jurisdiction, and authority of the housing of the Housing Commission. This is also on the document with the mission statement that we got from Commissioner Hilton. And so I'll be sharing a copy of this with you shortly. But I wanted to read part 2, which is that the Housing Authority of the City of Santa Monica is the recipient of federal funds for the Section 8 Housing Assistance Payments Program and has the capacity to provide rental subsidies to approximately 1,700 households. The Housing Commission is responsible for monitoring and evaluating the Housing Authority program and has provided oversight since the inception of the program. In addition, the Housing Commission has traditionally reviewed and developed recommendations to the Housing Authority and City Council on a variety of housing programs and policies, including the Fair Housing Program, the Community Development Block Grant Program, and the Comprehensive Housing Affordability Strategy. The Housing Commission participates in reviewing all phases of assisted housing development projects, including tenant selection policies and design features as they relate to the needs of future users. So I appreciated that clarification when I saw it in terms of our scope and our responsibilities. Now, if you'd like to turn to the attachments, I believe the bylaws are, sorry, there are a number of attachments here. Okay, we have attachment 3, I believe. Is the bylaws, the rules of order and procedure for the Housing Commission. It covers a lot of ground. I wanted to have it up as a reference, at least for the rest of our conversation, because I think a lot of our questions will in part refer to that document. Oh, and I'm sorry, before we move on, as we were talking about ADA accommodations, I just wanted to make clear that that ADA accommodations for Housing Commission meetings are available through our staff liaison, Noe Mendoza, for the public or for commissioners. And if you need accommodations at any time, please contact him. I think ideally at least 72 hours before the meeting is helpful. And if you have any questions, he's at noe.mendoza@santamonica.gov. So why don't we move on to some more the details of being on the Housing Commission now that we've looked at some of the big picture stuff. Does anyone have any questions in mind already about process, parliamentary procedure, reports, agenda making? I did want to point out, I'm not sure if it was covered yet in the materials that you got as new commissioners, but attendance is recorded for Housing Commission meetings, and that's also in the bylaws. There's a note about them that 2 unexcused absences and you forfeit your seat, and 2 excused absences and you're issued a warning. And being present at a meeting means that you were there for at least 2/3 of the time. And so they also keep track of in the minutes of coming late or leaving early, or if you have to step away. So just bear that in mind. Kate, you're one of our newest commissioners. Do you have any questions for us?
Hi. No, I actually read all the attachments and it's pretty straightforward, so not really. Thanks. Thanks for
Okay.
asking though.
I did want to mention the agenda making process. Before each agenda is created, and Vice Chair Roscoe before me did this too, I send out an email to everyone on the commission soliciting input for anything that you'd like to see on the agenda. But I really do encourage you to contact me anytime with anything that you'd like to see on the agenda. We'll have an opportunity coming up with the annual work plan subcommittee meetings to do a lot of that all at once. But if something comes up, a speaker or a recommendation or a topic you'd like us to look into, please bring it to my attention, and we'll make sure to agendize it. I think it's good to reinforce that what Councilmember De La Torre said, which is that we are the eyes and ears of Santa Monica as far as housing issues being brought to the City Council, and in turn we're representing all of Santa Monica. And so, in the same token, I encourage the public, please, to contact us and tell us what you would like to see, what your concerns are, what your questions are. If you have ideas you'd like us to look into or things you'd like us to explore or discuss at a meeting, please let us know. I believe all of us have functioning city email addresses now, and so they'll just be our first name dot last name at santamonica.gov. I encourage you to email any of us at any time. It's also been brought to it was suggested to me before the meeting that we might want to, in an effort to have more impact as a commission, that we would do well to increase our profile as a commission. I think we benefit from having more public input, and I feel like the more people come to meetings and the more people engage with the Housing Commission, the more successful we'll be, because we'll have more information directly from the people who are impacted. And so I encourage all of the commissioners and the public, but all of the commissioners, to reach out to your own networks and let them know about the Housing Commission meetings, encourage them to sign up for notifications for the meetings, and to share public input with us. I also wanted to mention that there is a devoted item on the agenda for written communications from the public. And so if anyone in the public, not just sending in comments, but if there's an issue or a matter or a concept that you'd like us to address, if you write that up and submit it to me, we can put it on the agenda and discuss it at length during a commission meeting. So I also encourage you to do that. So regarding my my conversation with City Attorney Doug Sloan on Friday, we talked about a number of things. And as I mentioned to Oscar, One of my outstanding concerns is us not having a staff liaison. The new, literally titled staff liaison, Noah Mendoza, is acting more as a commission secretary. And I also asked about looking into creating old minutes. For the last year, because we haven't had a secretary, there are no minutes for those meetings. That makes it difficult for us to see what actions have been taken. And we've been told that for the time being that the videos are meant to stand as minutes, and that's something I'm pushing back against and working to see if Noah can slowly move towards making minutes from old videos for the last year so we can more easily reference our past work. Let's see. And I also had Vice Chair Marosco and I had a meeting scheduled today with Dave White and Doug Sloan to discuss a number of staff issues related to the Housing Commission. And unfortunately, Dave was called in for jury duty, so we've had to reschedule that. But we hope to have a lot more information for you soon based on that conversation once it's rescheduled. Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
Chair Gray, Richard Hilton, I have a comment about agendas, and it's a timing suggestion. About 3 or 4 years ago, the commission voted, and this was because agendas and item attachments were ready Monday or Tuesday the same week as the Thursday meeting. We voted that the agendas would be finalized the preceding Thursday or Friday, 1 week before the meeting. This creates less stress on staff. Also, the commissioners can read the staff report and or attachments. Ever since our February meeting, it's been pretty routine that agendas have been finalized very near to the deadline, usually the same week as the meeting, sometimes Tuesday before the Thursday meeting. And my suggestion is, if possible, is that we return to our earlier completion schedule also for the attachments. And then I had a comment, because it was referenced earlier, about the mission statement. And maybe this is something, Chair, you might, or Vice Chair, want to bring up with City Administration. And our mission statement describes and it's all boards, commissions have a mission statement, which is publicly posted, and we spent 4 meetings with it on our agenda, and these were major revisions. With regard to composition, meaning the 7 members and especially the 2 designee appointees, is that the state requirements and HUD audit requirement differ, and it's in the handouts. The state establishes the minimum requirements. For example, that 2 of the housing commissioners be what's called tenants of the housing authority, and that 1 be over the age of 62 years. Separately, a HUD audit, and this is because of our large number of homeless, they said that the housing authority must have at least 1 homeless or formerly homeless person. And so in 2015, our bylaws were revised to add that the second housing authority tenant be someone with homeless experience, meaning that lived experience. At our January 20th meeting, only part 1 of my motion, which was to approve the edits revisions, was considered and approved. Motion part 2 was a request that all city references describing the Housing Commission be in conformity with the state requirement, tenants of the housing authority or housing authority program participants. Staff said at the meeting that this had to be agendized separately, and my concern at the January meeting and continuing is that if there's a vacancy for the two designees, the term the city's been using since about 2017, affordable housing program participants, is incorrect, and it's not in compliance with the state community development and housing health and safety code. So it's something we want to take up at a near future meeting. Affordable housing can be a resident in a deed restricted building without any federal subsidy. And that's the wording the city clerk uses now. In fact, when I was up for reappointment with the other commissioner, they used that term to the city council, and the city council was appointing based on an affordable housing program participant. So it's something to keep in mind, and especially for the chair or vice chair to discuss with city administration.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Hilton. I'm going to, and then I'm turning it over to Vice Chair Marasco. But so you know, this is something that is on our radar, and Vice Chair Marasco has already been working on this. It's a concern. Please go ahead, Vice Chair Marasco.
I was also going to be talking about agenda process and to just kind of explain to Commissioner Hilton. I don't know if Commissioner Hilton was aware or not, but this is part of the reason why I brought up how, you know, staff interacts with commissioners when putting items on the agenda, just so that you know that those items were tried to put those items on the agenda the week before, and there seemed to be some delay and process where staff was involved in. I can't say which staff. I just know in working with both Mary Orr and Noah, basically just waiting on them to get back to me, and while they're checking with other staff about the agenda items that were submitted. So, you know, I did have a lot of difficulty getting it done in a timely manner, not because I waited till the last minute, but because there seemed to be some delay between when the items are submitted to staff and then staff take it. And Councilmember De La Torre said, in the case of the city council, it may end up with City Attorney Sloan or with the city manager, David White. I'm not exactly sure the process for the Housing Commission, and I didn't get a chance to follow up with Councilmember De La Torre during this meeting about that, but that is something that I'd like to understand. What is the process once the staff member gets the agenda items? Who is it that is approving or not approving these items, or making changes to it, or however? And, you know, my apologies, because if I had a way to fax items to you in advance, you would have had those items in a timely manner. But I can only fax you 3 pages at a time. So it's made it really difficult to be able to, you know, I've done my best to try to fax you whatever emails that I've sent out that are easy to fax to you, that don't require for a paid account. And I did bring those, you know, I have brought that issue up to Mr. Kemper. I've brought it up to Andy Agel, and I believe I've talked to City Manager David White about it. So, you know, it is an ongoing issue with posting, you know, sending the items to the staff member and then actually getting the finalized version to approve. So I will follow up with Councilmember De La Torre on his commitment to come up with some kind of way to present that issue to the city council, and to come up with a way to formalize how things are done for boards and commissions between the commissioners and the staff members.
Vice Chair Marosco, could I also ask you to please follow up on, I know you're already working on it, but follow up on Commissioner Hilton's comments about them using the general language of affordable housing rather than Santa Monica Housing Authority participants. So
Yeah.
you know that the whole commission knows that's something, and as Commissioner Hilton said, that's something we've noted that the staff has done on, I think, 3 occasions now. They altered the agenda without telling us, changing that language. So the panel discussion when they were here, they changed the focus of that. And there seems to have been an effort over at least several months to shift slowly language from Santa Monica Housing Authority to affordable housing. And we're not quite sure why that is. So we're looking into that. But if you could continue with that language, Vice Chair Marosco. Thank you.
Actually, I was going to comment on that as well. Commissioner Hilton, I do remember us discussing that in the January meeting. And I didn't go back and look to the, and of course we don't have minutes to state exactly what was said. I did copy and paste the transcript and have been trying to go over it with regard to what was decided with as far as the composition section was concerned. And I do believe as a commission, we all agreed that it needed to stay uniform with the health and safety code and also with the mission statement, Housing Authority Program participant. And to include the application that I filled out to be a housing commissioner, because I am in, so that the new commissioners know, I am in one of those designated seats as a Housing Authority Program participant, Section 8 voucher holder, and also someone who was formerly homeless. So my initial application said Housing Authority Program participant, asked the question, am I a Housing Authority Program participant and was I formerly homeless? And I checked that box. And then, so this was back in January of last year when they were going to be appointing new commissioners. And just so that you know, our appointments came very late. They were delayed till December, I believe. November and December is when they actually appointed new commissioners. I believe Commissioner Gomez was appointed in November. Is that correct? And then I was appointed finally in December, but I had to fill out a new application. And the second application that I filled out said Affordable Housing Program participant. So somehow, without any communication with the Housing Commission or any kind of public, bringing, agendizing, changing the language, somehow, somewhere in the city, someone changed it to Affordable Housing Program participant. So I believe as a commission, Commissioner Hilton, in January, we agreed that composition needed to be changed. But now you're jogging my memory. I think you are correct in saying Mr. Kemper stated that we would have to agendize that separately because it was brought up at the last minute, I think, or we didn't have it on the agenda in January. Is that correct, Commissioner Hilton?
Well, I think his point was that it has to be specified, meaning to bring into conformity or compliance. The definition has to be specifically agendized, and it was not.
Okay. Well, that's something we can look at.
I just had one more question for Commissioner Hilton. So I don't have memory specifically of this. I've looked at the Granicus webpage for the Housing Commission numerous times. I don't remember if it was always stated as Affordable Housing Program participant or if that was something that was randomly changed in the last year. Do you have any memory, Commissioner Hilton, if that was recently changed or if it was always stated affordable housing program participant.
Actually, the terminology was changed around about 2017, and there's no explanation how it got changed. But I have my motion, and the motion was that staff, for purposes of accuracy, describe the commission members' composition for the two designated seats as housing authority rather than affordable housing program participants, and that the commission's bylaws, rules, webpage, appointments, application, and all other city documents be described the same. And
Okay,
staff
I'm gonna.
said it had to be agendized.
Thank you, Commissioner Hilton. Let's go ahead and agendize this. I don't want to continue talking about it now. It's outside the scope of this meeting, but we will definitely agendize this and come back to it. Are there any other questions, or Commissioner Borson, please?
Sorry, my phone's making noise. So the Housing Commission and the Housing Authority, are they only concerned with affordable housing, stuff like that, or are they concerned with market rate housing and condos, single family housing? What are we responsible for in this commission?
Well, as I read in the mission statement, it did specify affordable housing, although I think that could be interpreted broadly, because affordable housing is inextricably tied to market rate housing and construction in a lot of cases, condos, other forms of housing. So I think we have a pretty broad mandate, but the focus is on affordable housing. Yes. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm just thinking around what the gray areas are. Yeah, I'd have to think a bit more about that question. Let's go further with it. Thank you.
Sure. Yes, Commissioner Gomez.
Yeah, I think that was a great last question. And I don't know that this is necessarily an accurate depiction. There may be some subjectivity here, but from where I sit, obviously our scope, our foundation is in fact affordable housing, with one big caveat, and that is my belief, and again, this is subjective, that historically in the city, affordable housing has been construed as production, development, and building. And I think that's a very narrow focus. And I think without a doubt, our purview is to look at affordable housing in a much more broader fashion. I know I'm stating the obvious here, but I think because historically the focus has been on building and production, it's inhibited the creativity and I think productivity of this commission. And I don't mean to be disparaging in any way, shape, or form, but I say that in the context of it affording us an opportunity to do something different and to do something a lot more creative than what has been done in the past.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Gomez. Commissioner Borson.
Yeah, it's kind of follow on. I guess it's not just strictly affordable housing, it's anywhere where affordability imposed upon market rate housing or through Section 8, through the legacy rent control apartments that were last rented when vacancy control was present. They were effectively affordable units at that time. So I think there's a fairly wide net that goes beyond the classic affordable housing buildings. I think it may cover, most or all of the housing in the city in some way or other.
Yes, and I agree that affordable housing is that we do a disservice to the idea of affordable housing and the effort by focusing just on construction. There is a lot more that we can do, and I look forward to coming up with creative recommendations for the City Council around that. I did want to ask the new commissioners. I believe you did your Brown Act training on Monday. How did that go?
Yeah, I did. It was great. Fascinating.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Okay, good. And in terms of, I know it wasn't part of the training, but I wanted to mention parliamentary procedure. I don't know how much experience either of you have with it before now. There are some, in the bylaws, there are some introductions to the most basic actions that you'll take or motions that you'll make. And then if you're interested, you can check out Robert's Rules of Order, which is a very dense read, or you can try the Robert's Rules of Order newly revised in brief, which is a much more accessible, digestible, easily digested introduction to Robert's Rules. Yeah, let's see. Oh, and that also would be, if you'd like to submit your receipts for those to Noah, he can have you reimbursed for that. I don't know if you saw it. I believe it's in the bylaws that you can be reimbursed for up to $25 for expenses related to being a commissioner for each commission meeting, up to $50 a month. Let's see. What else? Covered everything. Oh, so just to extend on the creativity part, and also not to pick on you, Commissioner Borison, but I was reminded of it at our last meeting when you gave your reason for registering a no vote, and I was not at all disagreeing with your vote, but I do encourage everyone to voice as part of our discussion any misgivings or concerns or alternatives or anything to expand the discussion. I don't want anyone to feel like that's discouraged, so I hope next time you'll bring it up so we can all benefit from that observation, which I thought was a good observation about the connectivity between the Rent Control Board and non-rent controlled units. I thought that was a very good observation. So I encourage everyone in general to please chime in. The more the merrier. And I like to have vibrant, engaging discussions. So yeah. Are there any other questions or comments from commissioners? If not, I'd like to open up. Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I only have one. It's more operational in nature. And I know that the chair and one of the commissioners voiced the merits of these type of forums because, I mean, you're right. It's great from a public access perspective, but also there's an awful lot of merit in terms of being able to get together in person. On a host of fronts. And I don't know the answer to this, but do we have any, and I do like a hybrid type of an approach, but do we have any indication when we might meet in person, or is this just, are we in like suspended animation here? And
Getting a little cabin fever.
Yeah, well, I just bring it up because I'm not even certain when there's the potential of a fixed date in terms of when a decision is going to be rendered, right? So that's the only reason why I'm bringing it up. And again, I think it's good to get together in person, even if it's not every session. But does
Right.
anybody know anything about this? Because I don't.
As far as I know, we are definitely slated to be calendar year, not the fiscal year. And then it really is based on the emergency status, either on a federal, state, or local level. And so it really is tied in a lot to the pandemic and what the situation is like on the ground. I agree that hybrid would be great going forward to get the best of both worlds, and I totally hear you about getting together in person. But I think it's unknown at this point, and
Yeah.
they're kind of playing it by ear because they keep extending the city council. If it gets folded in, I think to usually to the item on the agenda where they approve a lot of things all at once. Sorry, the term has escaped me for a moment, but if you notice, for the last many months, the city council has been periodically approving additional extensions of these things for the boards and commissions because it's happening. It's only for a couple months at a time that they're approving it and then reevaluating as they go. So they don't have a definite end time, unfortunately. But yes, for all boards and commissions, it'll be virtual at least through the end of this calendar year.
Okay.
Commissioner Borson.
Yeah, I just want to point out there was a message posted by Steve Weinraub saying that hybrid meetings often don't work very well because the in-person people have more, sway with the meeting than the ones that are remote. The other thing is, I think there's still an emergency. There's still emergency regulations operating in the city in regard to housing and various other things. And so, if there is an emergency in the city, is that an emergency because of potential infection, or is it because of financial emergency? How that? I know the council is meeting in person now, so is there an emergency or is there not? And then it's and it only applies to certain things and not to others, and so it's all very confusing as far as where we sit. But anyway.
Yeah, I'll just answer that quickly, and then Vice Chair Marasco, you can go ahead. I'm not a government expert, but my understanding is that declaration of an emergency on a governmental level, either federal, state, or local at the city level or at the county level, is an action that enables a cascade of other things to take place, that gives special powers to those jurisdictions, that frees up money that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. And so it's not necessarily a lay definition of emergency state referring to the level of transmissibility, for example. I mean, that certainly could be why it was called, but it's actually it's a function. That status enables a bunch of other things to happen for whatever jurisdiction is in question, so they can act accordingly. So that's why we're still considered, at least locally, I believe, to be under those emergency measures. It enables things like these meetings, these virtual meetings, and I'm sure a lot of other things that have been impacted by COVID throughout Santa Monica government. So I'm sure it's a very complex question that's not solely based on transmission numbers, I guess is my point. Vice Chair Marasco.
Yes, this actually was for Councilmember De La Torre, question for him, but maybe a question in general for the commission, maybe follow up later with Councilmember De La Torre. But specifically how the commission is able to get assistance from staff with regard to research for any types of future study sessions. For just a simple example would be looking into changing the current payment standard exception for Section 8 or housing choice voucher holders to small area FMR, which is changing the payment standard by zip code, which does require some research in order for the Santa Monica Housing Authority to make a request of HUD, and that would be coming around in June, would be their opportunity for the year to ask for that increase in the payment standard. So with keeping that in mind, it's kind of not specifically stated how much time we can ask the staff to dedicate towards something like that as providing information for the commissioners. So I don't know if anybody else is interested in that, knows more about it, wants to speak on that, respond to me on that.
All I can say is that that was definitely on the agenda for the meeting with Dave White, which we'll be rescheduling. So we will definitely be asking him specifics on that. But it's a good reminder in general that if there are things that we'd like to know, studies that we'd like to happen, or more extensive research, that we need to plan ahead and put it as a request to City Council for them to direct staff to do it, because we can't direct staff to undertake larger research projects. But where that line falls, we'll find out when I talk with Dave White. Oh, I also wanted to mention, somebody commented in the chat. I invited James Kemper to be here tonight. He wasn't able to join us. It is true that we scheduled this meeting rather last minute, and so it didn't give a lot of opportunity to guests. It didn't give them much lead time. I also invited or asked Doug Sloan if he would loan us one of his members of staff from the city attorney's office to answer legal questions. And after a lot of recent back and forth regarding the legality and permissibility of special meetings, he determined that some of our questions, out of an abundance of caution, he would prefer us submit our questions to him and give him an opportunity to research them and come back to make sure that he doesn't accidentally give us misinformation. But I can share that we are legally meeting right now. We are entitled to periodically call special meetings. Yeah, and the rest of that is a conversation for another day. So the but it didn't really occur to me until after we had discussed it and the meeting was already scheduled that it would be nice to have certain knowledge area experts on hand, and I did invite Jim Kemper and someone from the city attorney's office, but unfortunately we'll just have to schedule that out more in advance for next time, and maybe that'll go more towards you know, a cramming session, you know, a conference, that's a part of a conference, for example, that as Councilmember De La Torre mentioned, that at the beginning of the year, it would be nice if the entire Housing Commission got a crash course on what the issues were for that year. You know, it might be something more like that. Let's see. Yes, so if you do have any legal questions, let me know and I will share them with the city attorney. And I wanted to remind everybody that we will be start having the first of our 3 subcommittee, our ad hoc annual work plan subcommittee meetings starting next week. And those will be designated special meetings, and because we have a quorum, but they're not special meetings of the entire commission. Commissioner Gomez, you weren't here, so you didn't have an opportunity to weigh in, but I had explained that because we had already voted previously to have this particular work plan subcommittee meetings in public, that Brown Act constraints about having 3 or fewer members on a subcommittee don't apply. So we have 5 people so far, and if you'd like to join the subcommittee, you're welcome to. We have 3 virtual meetings planned for the next 3 weeks. And the only business will just be the Hill Street Working Group.
I don't want to take up the other commissioners' time here, so if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll follow up with you, and
of course
you can brief me a bit, and then I'll let you know. So.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, so I'd just like to remind everyone who is going to be joining us for those subcommittee meetings, please come prepared with at least one idea of something that you'd like to see us address in the coming fiscal year for the Housing Commission. And if there are no other questions or comments from commissioners, I'd like to open it up one last time to any public comments.
Somebody,
yes, Commissioner Gomez.
Somebody needs to mute. There's a lot of background noise.
Got it.
Hello?
Yes?
Hi. I guess it was this agenda item. It was in one of the, it was in the explanation there. It would be very helpful if the public and the commission were to understand exactly what the people running the housing authority are hired to do. I think it's just that simple. Understanding what their job functions are and what they're doing, how that relates to what the commission is doing, and how that relates to how the public can do its job in order to facilitate the needs of the community. So I would be very interested in having that information available at a future meeting. And I'd also be very interested in having consistent updates on the level of staffing at the housing authority, how many jobs are filled, how many jobs are vacant, what those jobs entail, where they're falling short, and how that's impacting the community. So these are pretty basic things that should be transparent to everyone, so we know who does what, and we know who to contact. It's kind of simple, but it seems to have been, it became even more complicated when the housing authority, by the power of the city council, was put into another grouping that, fell under this other structure and just kind of seems to have gone less visible than it once was. So that's my comment. And this is Ann Thanawala, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thanawala. Are there any other public comments? Any other public comments?
There was a comment earlier about is condo housing part of our housing commission jurisdiction, and I want to explain. The Housing Commission participates when market rate contributes to the development of affordable housing, such as Affordable Housing Production Program, and we call it the base percentage requirement. In other words, what's the lesser requirement for affordable housing in those otherwise market projects? Also, we're involved in market rate, for example, if it competes or is some way an obstacle, such as in the case of fair housing. So in other words, if there was a development or a condo proposal for a mobile home park, we might get involved. And as far as the state housing element, this is the production of newly constructed units, and it's every 8 years. The Planning Commission's discussion are almost entirely suitable sites, what's possible, and market housing. And the Housing Commission contribution is affordable housing and revenue sources. So what determines production as far as the market is the profit margin, and what determines the production of affordable housing is the revenue sources. So that brings me to what I think is a very valuable source of affordable housing information for the commissioners, and it's called Housing Trust Fund Guidelines, and it was first adopted November 24th, 1998, and there have been 8 amendments, and these are the terms between the city and the affordable housing developer. Our most current guidelines is dated July 27, 2021. We have 7 trust funds and 3 are federal funding sources which have specific requirements: Home Community Development Block Grant and TORCA. Our 7th trust fund is called Local Housing Trust Fund, and it's the voter approved sales tax, GSH, transactions and use tax, and that generates $6 to $8 million a year. That's the Local Housing Trust Fund, 7th trust fund, and that's where the $1.5 to $2 million originates for our preserving our diversity monthly benefit housing subsidy for seniors. But you should all take a look at the Housing Trust Fund Guidelines. That's
Thank
a
you.
real important document.
Commissioner Hilton, can I ask you to please send that in a message to Noah, to the staff liaison, and ask him if he can find a copy of that and email it to all the commissioners?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That sounds like a valuable resource. If nobody has anything else, I think that's it for tonight. Thank you all for your patience and your participation. I hope this has been informative and helpful. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great week, guys.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.